I want to loudly welcome all of the students in the entire Brown community, all the undergraduates, the staff, the graduate students, the medical students, but especially the class of 2019. Welcome to Brown. This is actually a great honor to be here to address you, and I'm so thrilled to see so many of you here. I'm not sure I went to the equivalent of this when I was a first year at Yale, but it's different there. We'll leave that alone. I want to just talk for a few minutes. I don't want to take very much of your time, but I do want to share a sort of a reminder that I'm hoping will be of use to you as you think about your classes here, your friendships, your work, and your sense of the world you're in. And the reminder is really a simple one in many ways. I want you to keep in mind the extent to which so much in our world remains unfinished. Like these very words, they're written down, surely. They've been considered, I've thrown away versions, it's been typed and printed, and yet they can't convey all I intend. They can't tell you everything that's in my heart and my mind. After I hear them, I'm sure I'll wish I had conveyed something differently, said something more, or, because professors talk a lot, perhaps say something less. These words are provisional and undone, always. And if something I say to you today is of such import or meaning or use that you carry it forward in your world, then it will mean things that we can't anticipate now. So much hard work went into the journey that brought you here. Class of 2019, you have accomplished the near impossible. You've dazzled our admissions office. You have no idea how hard that can be. But the classes of 2016, 17, 18, graduate school students, medical students, you've also worked incredibly hard. You've impressed your faculty and your peers. Every year you do more. Every year we assign more. Every year you make new goals. But your education remains unfinished. It will always be unfinished. Now, herein lies a tension. The more you learn, the more goals you complete, the longer your journey toward knowing. It sounds depressing, I know, but with each step, you will generate a longer road with new questions, new perspectives, and new unanswered questions. Go ahead, ask the seniors. Ask the graduate students, or definitely ask your professors, do they have new questions? Do they feel like they've mastered anything? The more we know, the less it seems we know. Brown will be a profound influence in your educational process over the next several years, but the impact of Brown on you will also remain unfinished. It is true that when you walk out of Van Wickle Gate, you will in fact be finished with your education at Brown. It will be completed. But Brown will stay in touch with you. Oh yes, we will. Alumni newsletters, reunions, and definitely requests for donations. And news of new generations of Brunonians making their mark on Brown. A Brown legacy begun in 1764, but that is in fact quite unfinished. This historic university, like many institutions that persevere, is in many ways a story of dynamism. The ideals that shape Brown are grand in vision, but as is the case with many of our founding institutions in the United States, they have not been that way consistently in practice. They've needed the challenges that you bring. They've needed the contest and the support over the years to move closer to the vision of opportunity and egalitarianism that defines the core mission of Brown. This project remains unfinished. Our families, their contributions, their love, their loss, their loneliness, their togetherness, our parents and all kinds of relatives and community members are critical to the way in which we understand our world today. And so in that sense, the past and all that's happened to our loved ones are part of an unfinished legacy of which we are now a part. Your being here, while you worked hard as an individual to be sure, is also a reflection of your family members' unending, and I will say unending, giving. Those who came before us give us what we have now. And this is important because it means whatever we do now impacts each other and everyone who follows. Now, I admit that I'm a willfully hopeful sort of person, which is odd because I trade in data that's generally not super cheerful. So I know I sound upbeat about these dangling threads. There's a downside to this unfinished business, and I'm sure, because you're Brown students, you've already figured much of this out. You're thinking to yourself, well, unfinished things don't have to become terrific. Everything that's unfinished doesn't turn out so well. Things can get worse. I mean, in fact, today, you might be saying to yourself, unfinished? I have to finish. I mean, if I don't complete this work and I don't graduate from Brown, I'll truly be finished. Well, you might be kind of right about that. I know how parents can be. And unfinished states are tremendous opportunities for growth, but they're also opportunities for decline and loss. Things do get worse. The unfinished can collapse. Time can turn a house into a pile of bricks, but time cannot turn a pile of bricks into a house. Breakdown and decay are real. But in the unfinished lies an incredibly exciting opportunity, a possibility that being unfinished opens up. What is not yet finished can be changed. What is not yet finished can, with work, love, commitment, and challenge, be transformed. I tell you all of this not because I know your personal journeys, but because I do know that when we think carefully about significant injustice in the world, it can be a profoundly daunting situation. I was very proud of the many students and administrators who proposed and agreed to assign the new Jim Crow as a first reading, because it's a very challenging work on a variety of levels to an ideal that we have proposed for the contemporary state. I found it, really moving in many ways. I mean, I guess I'm an analytical thinker because it got to my heart. I was really interested in what President Paxson said because I found it a very compassionate and moving story in many ways. But for some of you, it may have been the first time, or one of the close to first times, in which you were brought face to face with a post-civil rights era built, meaning completely constructed in the post-civil rights era, a patently unjust so-called justice system that bears striking resemblance to the very Jim Crow system the civil rights movement aimed to end. These hallmarks were revised and reframed using the ideology of colorblindness to generate and to reinforce and to continue familiar and systemic racial inequalities. There was a lot of data and detail, and it explained the complexity of a devastating system. But I would argue that there's something more devastating about this kind of work that isn't really about the data, but about the way in which we have used in the post-civil rights era the ideology of the illusion of colorblindness as the rhetorical vehicle for the maintenance and development of a system like the prison-industrial complex. For those of you who are students of history or students of African American studies, you certainly know that prior to the civil rights movement, we had legalized, justified, articulated racial hierarchy. One of the great extraordinary gifts of the civil rights movement was the dismantling of what was very explicit white supremacist ideology. And yet what's happened with the prison-industrial complex, along with many other indices in American society, is that we have a rhetoric of racial equality that has been twisted into a discourse of colorblindness that drove the reproduction of a very similar system that took place under white supremacy and Jim Crow. This is a very profound moment to think about. It isn't just a matter of hatred and hierarchy. It's a matter of justification in ways that we were complicit, many of us without knowing at all. And so what do we do with this shock that we learn we need to fight battles we were told we had already won? I mean, for decades, if you could bear to watch the news or the pundits, or even many scholars, honestly, for the past 40 years, you would hear that systemic racism is over, that most of the injustice we see is leftover, residual. It will sort of naturally fade out. and that the justice system in this case, which people argue today too, is a singular aberration, and that the basic principles of merit, of fairness, of egalitarianism are actually intact, in place. But if you study US history and you pay attention to the contemporary period, you'll see that it is quite systemic in all indices and all facets of American society. The most important ones: wealth, health, education, jobs, unemployment, etc., the criminal justice system, media representation. These work in a web-like way to create a profoundly normalizing system of inequality that looks completely reasonable. One of the most troubling things that have emerged in the post-civil rights era that is part of the unfinished business that we must work on is that for a long time, prior to the last year and a half to 2 years when so much of this has come to light, it was very consistent to sort of shame people who were trying to talk about race. The idea was that if you talk about race, or you talk about gender, or if you talk about class inequality, or if you talk about discrimination, you in fact are creating it. If you just don't stop paying attention to it, it will just go away. And there's been quite a bit of shaming in this regard. We've seen it now in regard to many of the responses to the Black Lives Matter campaign. There have been outraged challenges to Black Lives Matter with the claim that all lives matter, as if to say that Black Lives Matter means all the rest of the lives don't matter. They're not clearly students of logic. Does it mean that we should be imagining that talking about what Black lives mean in this context is somehow an affront? This is the classic work of colorblindness. Use the phrase all, which is intended to undermine our ability to identify a group of people who are being mistreated and oppressed, whichever group that may be, using all as a cover for the normalization of an obvious hierarchy. But when I'm not doing analytical thinking about this, I do ask myself, my goodness, in the face of so much heartbreaking violence against Black people, and this is only what we see on the tip of the iceberg, how could saying Black Lives Matter and inviting the whole world to join in, how can this be controversial? So profound injustice is unfinished work in our country and around the world. But there are, and you must remember, always the possibilities that the unfinished allows. What is not yet finished can be changed. What is not yet finished with our work, love, and commitment can be transformed. Students of communities and cultures around the world who've survived centuries of inequality and oppression know that there's a powerful hope that can be developed under the conditions of unfinished, ongoing suffering. Each freedom seized builds the house that time alone could not build. Knowing that we are and that our work in the world is unfinished is an opportunity. It's not an excuse for complacency. It's not meant to inspire lollygagging in the trough between our reality and our vision for a more peaceful, just, and thoughtful world. Instead, the possibilities that the unfinished allows are an urgent call for us to contribute, to find openings, to keep trying, to questioning, seeing possibility even when so much wrong seems set in stone or impossible. My time here and this speech is over, but I hope these words are unfinished, and I hope that they encourage you to do something new, generous, and just with them. Thank you.